I want to talk first about, before we even talk about mechanics of pitching, it's never too young to address with players this part of pitching right here. All right, I tell kids at our pitching clinics that there's two parts of their body that are the most important parts of the body to become a good pitcher. And all the kids think it's your arm. Well, one is your brain, and the other is a little lower. Okay, you got to have rocks, and you got to have a good head to be a pitcher, because it's one of the most mentally taxing positions in all of sports. And if you take a kid and say, hey, take this baseball and throw it as far as you can across the field, a kid will pick up that ball and not even think twice about it, pick it up and launch it as far and hard as he can, and he'll probably show you a great arm. You put that same kid on a mound and say, okay, now throw that ball 45 feet or throw that ball 60 feet. All of a sudden, the kid can't hit the broadside of a barn, because the mentality changes. And I think no matter what we talk about in terms of mechanics, the most important thing is to impress upon your pitchers that they just have one very simple job. Stay loose, breathe, and take that ball and throw it right through the middle of your catcher's body. A lot of times we tell our pitchers, throw right to the glove, have a catch, throw to the glove. But a glove is very small. It's a small little circle. If you tell your pitchers to pick out a box right in the middle of their catcher's body and just fill that box up with baseballs, now all of a sudden they have a much bigger target to throw to, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to be around the plate because they're throwing to something they can actually hit. And that doesn't even have anything to do with mechanics. That's just mentality. A lot of times if a kid's not throwing strikes, it's more about that than it is about what he's doing mechanically. Okay? Now I'm going to have Nate come up, and he's going to start as if he was throwing from the stretch position. And I think when kids are learning how to pitch for the first time, I think this is probably the best way to go, because a lot of times it's just the very beginning of their windup that can cause the most difficulty. But I will also tell you this. One thing that every single kid can do from a young age, even from the first time that they learn how to pitch, every kid can learn this. Every kid can learn how to pitch. And if you have a team full of 12 kids and every one of them can pitch, then as those kids get older, their teams are going to be deeper and deeper and deeper, and they're going to be able to play more and more games and win more and more games because they're never going to run out of arms. And when those kids get to the high school and there's 65 kids trying out for 36 to 40 spots, if a kid can pitch, he's got a much better chance of making the team, because we'll keep 6 or 7 pitchers, but we'll only keep maybe 2 first basemen or 2 shortstops. So every kid can learn this, all right? So Nate's going to come to the stretch, and he's going to get nice and comfortable and come right to the belt, okay? Now, in this position, he's got a couple things going on. One, you'll notice that his weight is partially back, okay? You'll also notice that his hands are nice and comfortable right around the middle of his body. And as Coach McCreary said, he's got eyes all across the front of his body that are facing the catcher, okay? Now, Nate's foot is in front of the rubber. For some reason, a lot of kids think that they have to start on top of the rubber, but they should be right there in front of the rubber, okay? Now, from this position, Nate's just going to go right up into his balance position. I want to talk about balance a little bit before we go forward, okay? When Nate kicks his leg up, there's a couple things that are going on, okay? Number one, through his whole delivery, his chin is going to stay over his front side. He's never going to lean back. He's never going to lean forward. He's going to stay nice and compact, chin over the front side. His leg is going to come up to at least parallel to the ground, and he's going to take his front hip and turn it in just a little bit, all right? I tell kids it's kind of like taking your left butt cheek and showing it to the hitter a little bit. That gets your lower half, it gets your core involved, it gets you a little bit more explosive. That balance position is one of the most important parts of any pitching delivery. If you have balance, then you can have success, all right? Like I tell the kids, your life should be balanced, and so should your pitching delivery. It's just as important, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly back up, and we're going to learn how to get into the balance position from the windup, okay? The reason why, and this is a question we get every year, why the windup instead of the stretch? And the difference is that the windup really helps to build a little fluidity. And so if a kid can learn early to throw from a windup, then he's going to have probably more natural fluid mechanics because his body gets moving, he generates some momentum, and he can get into that balance position in the same place every time. So when Nate gets in the rubber, again, he's going to have both heels in the rubber because he's basic and he's just learning, okay? All right, and he's going to have his feet pointed a little bit to the right, and when he takes that small step back, his body's barely going to move. So he's going to take a small step back with his left foot, and he's going to pivot his right. Okay, that's step one of delivery. Small step back, pivot with the right. From here, he's going to go right up to where you just saw him in the balance position. This is the part that causes kids trouble because they have too big of a step this way, too big of a step this way. But if we can cut down that small step and just go basic, step, pivot, now it's easy for them to get right back up to where we just had them, okay? The other thing Nate's going to do is he's going to have his glove when he turns. He's going to have it just like Coach McCreary showed you when you're throwing, and he's going to have his thumbs pointed down. If you take the glove off, your hands would look like this, kind of like you're praying, like, please, God, let me throw a strike, okay? And so that way, when he breaks his hands come right out to where they're supposed to be, thumbs down. If you have your glove turned toward you like this, your arm's going to come back this way, and we don't want that. We want the arm to come down to the thigh and then the fingers to the sky, and so in order to do that, he's going to have his glove turned that way when he comes up to his balance. All right, so now Nate's going to go back up to his balance position again, just where we just were. Now, when he kicks up to that balance, and I'm going to show you a couple videos here in a little bit, he's not just lifting his leg, he's also transferring his weight. He's getting everything back here, just like a slingshot, because that's where his power is going to come from, okay? Again, in his balance, everything's lined up, everything's nice and compact. Now, in order to move from the balance position to the power position, we have to make sure that our guys are keeping their weight on that back leg as long as they can. And this is where a lot of kids' mechanics fall apart, because they'll want to come out of their balance position and just fall forward. And then their arm drags back here, and now they already lost all their lower half weight, so when they go to throw, it's all arm, and their arm just can't quite catch up, okay? So Nate doesn't like to stand in his balance position for too long tonight. So he's going to come up. Now from here, we're going to go nice and slow. Nate's going to bring his foot down, and when he does that, his arm is going to come out to his hip at the same time, okay? Now, you're not being a very good model tonight. Come on now. All right, back up to the balance position. All right, he's going to break arm and hand together, just like this. When you're teaching kids how to pitch, this is something you should have them do over and over and over again, okay? This is what keeps their weight back. This is what gets them to start to get their hand out of their glove at the right time. I wouldn't have a problem with the kid doing this for 5-10 minutes straight until he built that muscle memory. He'd get a little tired and a little bored and start watching the airplanes flying up the sky, but this is probably the most important part of the delivery and where a lot of things tend to fall apart, okay? By coming down and out at the same time, he's setting himself up to be able to come toward the plate and get the arm up where it's supposed to be, okay? So from this position, just go down where we just were and hold it. Okay, from this position now, Nate's going to bring his foot on a slight curve toward home plate, and while he's doing that, his back arm's going to come up. That was perfect. Well done, okay? And now we're into what, stay there. And now we're into what we call the power T, okay? We call it a power T because if you do it the right way, your body really is forming a T. Shoulders are about even, and his weight is right down the center, okay? Once his foot lands, he's getting to about 50-50, okay? And you'll notice some of the basics that Coach McCreary talked about with pitching, okay? You'll notice that his elbow is above his shoulder. All right, you'll notice that his front side is pointed toward the catcher, okay? From this position, now we're going to start to rotate and get into our release. So Nate's going to take his glove on the front side, and that glove is going to come in toward his body, okay? You can do that, all right? And he's going to turn, and his hand is going to be up here at his release, okay? One of the things we're going to look for in pitchers is that their elbow and their arm are staying up here at the release point, okay? Not falling back in here and not being back here. We want to be up here so that we can be on top of the baseball, and when we release, we can get out in front, okay? This is your standard release point. Now, a lot of pitchers, the biggest mistake they make is that when they let go of the ball, they think their job is over. It's finishing the pitch that in sometimes is the biggest difference between a kid that can keep the ball down in the zone and throw strikes and the kid whose balls are just flying all over the place, okay? So when Nate finishes, and you can just wait till I tell you, when he finishes, go ahead, stay there, his arm is going to come forward, okay? Right now, his left hip, just go back a little bit to where you were. All right, right now his left hip is facing the catcher, but after he releases that pitch and brings his arm all the way through, when he gets done and rotates his hip, it's going to be the opposite hip that's going to be facing the catcher if he finished properly, okay? So go ahead and go to your finish. Okay, now, here's what I want to caution you about. All right, this is where a lot of kids, I think, go wrong. What you do not want to tell kids after they release is you do not want to tell them to bring their back leg around. If you tell them bring their back leg around and become a fielder, well then what happens is kids come through and they just pick up their leg and move it, and they're really not using their hips, which is the strongest part of their body, okay? So what we really want to do is we want to tell them as they come toward the plate, Get that glove into the front side and just pop the hips. And the back foot really just comes up and comes down. They don't have to do anything with the back foot or the back leg. It's just going to follow with their hips. And yes, they become fielders after they pitch, but let them finish their pitch first. Otherwise, you'll get kids that when they finish, they just go like this, okay? We want them to be fluid and smooth. We want them to take their hand from that release point, and it's like they're pulling in a seatbelt and locking that seatbelt in over the front side. I'm going to show you some pictures up here in a second where I'm going to show you exactly what all that looks like, okay? Nate, one more time, let's go from the very beginning. Step 1, small step back. Step 2, pivot. Step 3, kick. Step 4, down. Step 5, out. Step 6, to the release. Step 7, finish. Okay? Now, when you're teaching a kid how to go through the delivery for the first time, it's very important to teach those kids steps of the delivery. And then it's important to have them go through it all the way through, because you don't want them to get too stiff or too mechanical, okay?